All right, so 7 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the information meeting about the upcoming Leland and Gray withdrawal vote. Do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda, folks? No? All right. Members of the public, if you're here to speak, if you're here to ask questions or talk about what's actually, the July 16th vote, you have a space on the agenda. If there's something else you wanted to discuss, now would be your time. Okay. Anybody have any correspondence at all? All right. Beautiful. Okay, so the July 16th upcoming vote. It is a vote to allow the town of Windham to withdraw from the Leland and Gray School District. The Leland and Gray School District was formed plus or minus 50 years ago by the 5 towns, Windham, Newfane, Brookline, Jamaica, and Townsend, and has been operational for that 50 years as a union middle high school district. Under the terms of the statute governing union schools, if a school wants to leave, they have to vote to do that, and then the other towns then get notification from the state to warn a vote to either allow that withdrawal, yes or not. Each town votes individually rather than commingled, which has been the case with the West River votes. This is really a vote that the town school boards would be administering, but since we've got the new district forming, we're not administering it really, but we're holding the information meeting because it's a place for people to come and get that information. So each town then has to vote separately. Those votes are counted separately, and each town actually has to say yes. So even if 3 towns say yes, it's fine, they can go, the 4th town could say no, and the request to withdraw would be denied. So that's the technicalities behind it. We have gathered a bunch of financial data, which was over on that table, Bill?
And
over on that table. We have extra copies up here if you don't have one. And it's posted on our West River Education District website if you want to follow along at home. Probably the easiest way to go through all of that financial data is to just let you run through it, Lori, right?
Sure.
Would you? And then we can ask questions about that or anything else that, any other questions you might have about what happens going forward or what something would mean or...
Okay.
Okay.
So the board asked me to put together some data as far as a 3-year comparison. And then I sort of summarized it because I think that from a financial standpoint, it's fairly simple, which it's a very complex funding formula, but in the end, this subject comes down to the fact that equalized pupils are worth more than tuition students. But let me run through. So I want to just sort of ask both the board and the public, just to make sure we're all on the same page, do you understand what the difference between ADM, the census count, is and equalized pupils? Or would you like me to explain it? Does everybody feel comfortable, or would you like me to?
I'd love an explanation.
Okay.
Sure.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
I sure will.
Thank you.
So ADM is the average daily membership, and there's a census taken by law every fall that counts the students in the chairs, in the schools. Okay. So that is used to calculate all sorts of things like class sizes, student-teacher ratios. So when we talk about students in a class, we're talking about the bodies in the room, in the chairs. So the AOE takes that number that we all have to report to the state, and they turn it into an equalized pupil. So an equalized pupil is basically an equalization of pupils throughout the whole state, and it's what drives the tax rate. It is one of the major components of the tax rate. So secondary students, which is what we're discussing tonight, are equal to 1.13. So it's not a 1-to-1. So if you have a 7th grader sitting in a chair, their equalized pupil ratio is 1.13. Okay. So then it goes through a lot of calculations done by the AOE, and I'm happy to sit down with anybody and go through the 47-page document that I get that basically comes up with these equalized pupil numbers. So in the case of fiscal year 20, which is the year that we're in, the budget year that we're in, the secondary students, so there were, I believe, 6 or 7 bodies, translated to 8.83 equalized pupils. Everybody following me so far? Okay. So we can all agree that when you look at your 3-year comparisons in your town reports, that the equalized pupil is what drives the tax rate. That and expenses, so it's your expenses minus any offsetting revenues, which grants or tuition, anything like that, gives you your expenses, and then you're dividing that number by your equalized pupil, and that gives you the cost per pupil that you're voting on. So when you go to the vote polls and you see that, there's a cost per student, in this case it was 20,000.
705.
Thank you. 705 for West River. So when you reduce equalized pupils, what happens? Your cost per student goes up, which drives your tax rate up. When you reduce them, when you reduce them or if you increase them, it has the same effect on the tax rate. So let's talk a little bit about tuition students, because then the other piece of this on the summary is, so what happens if 0 tuitioning students come into the district? So in that case, 8.83 equalized pupils are worth the cost per student of $20,705, right? So that's $182,000. If 0 students come in to go towards that offsetting revenue that I was talking about, then that's what needs to be raised by all the other voters in West River. Or, I'm sorry, landowners, right? Not necessarily voters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Residents. So if some students come in, 100% is what this summary sheet says, then that's going to mean 7 times the tuition rate. So West River announced a tuition rate of $17.4 for fiscal year 20, okay? So even if all the 7 through 12 students attended Leland and Gray, you still have a gap, right? There's still money to be raised because you're losing equalized pupils. Is everybody following me so far? Okay. So that's the gap of what will need to be raised if you lose students, lose equalized pupils. So I want to just talk about the tuition for a minute more, because a logical question that always comes into my mind is, well, then why don't you raise tuition to the same as what your cost per student is, right? So the $20,000. So we have a few different areas where that can't possibly happen. One of them is just pure competitiveness. So the average state tuition for public schools for secondary was $15,750. The BUHS that was BUHS's tuition. Burton, our neighbors that have a private school, are at $17,577. So by raising that to $20,000, obviously you're going to lose students that would tuition in from the major tuitioning towns, which is Dover, Marlborough, and Wardsboro. And then, so that's what it really boils down to. I mean, we can go through all of these different pages, but the bottom line is that it's basically that equalized pupils are just worth more to the tax rate than tuition. And then when we're looking out into the future a little bit, is Windham does have 2 very large classes for Windham coming through. And so this will continue to grow, right? The equalized pupils could get up to somewhere in the 12.38.
One class.
Okay. Let's see, you have yeah, 7 or 8, and then 5th grade is coming in too. I don't know, I got a list from Nikki, so I think that,
Yeah, this year, there were no 4th or 5th graders.
right, or, so 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, there were no students.
Yeah, 3rd or 4th.
Moving up.
Right. The 5th graders that are moving to will be that large class, but then after that, there's a gap with no students for 2
Right.
years.
So, eventually the equalized pupils will go down. It's a 2-year rolling average is what the AOE uses, so it takes a couple of years to catch up. So I only went out 3 years in this. So I think I said on here, so fiscal year 23, the students climb, and then after that they come down, but they don't come down, to 0 because you've got the 2-year average going. And of course, students can move in and move out, and these are just projections. So, do you guys have any questions?
Well, the only thing, we're losing students evidently, but you've offered free tuition, which seems ridiculous. That's gonna even raise your cost per student higher.
We haven't
Who's gonna pay
offered
for
free
that?
tuition.
No free
We haven't offered free tuition.
Well, your minutes showed it last month, so. Then somebody authorized it, then somebody pulled it back, so I don't know, that's why I'm here. I don't know the
They
story
were
yet.
discussing.
We were discussing whether or not to
There was a
offer free
request.
tuition for a year. There's requests.
Requests.
We have not authorized anything to be done yet.
And also that request was
That's
not a high
good.
school request.
Right.
That's right.
That request was not a high school request. It was a request for elementary, for a student to join the middle school.
Well, it says though in your minutes that the Windham parents have children attending Leland Gray without paying tuition.
Those are accurate. The request
That was a
is
request.
for a 6th grade student
For
in
one
Windham.
student?
There are 2 official requests. that
But
have
doesn't
come
that
to us.
open it up to everybody else that's paying, saying, I don't want to pay?
I'm sorry, sir?
Doesn't that open it up to everybody else that's paying? Saying, if
We
you're
talked
not
about doing a
allowed
pilot
to
program for a year.
These
Why can't I?
these are only requests. We haven't said yes or no yet.
That's a good question.
Okay, well, that's good, but, to me, it seems ridiculous when we're having such a problem here.
Come to our next meeting. That's on the agenda, please.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So Lori, but just for instance, let's say we take in tuition-free kids. Doesn't that increase on, let's say we take in kids at a lesser tuition, but we get more kids. Doesn't every kid we take in, no matter what we charge, lower our cost per pupil as long as it doesn't increase our costs?
So when what it does is add to your offsetting revenues, right? So every tuition student does help, and that's what the summary
I'm
says.
just saying, but aren't we taxed based on our average cost per pupil?
You're taxed on the expenses divided by your equalized pupil.
Right, so if we add pupils, whether or not we charge tuition for them, don't those additional pupils increase our numbers and then reduce our cost per pupil?
Not as much as the equalized pupil.
So I can answer.
How
Yeah.
So,
public school tuition is.
a tuition student is different than a quote-unquote equalized pupil homegrown student. So a tuition student just represents in the tax rate formula of revenue coming in. A equalized pupil counts as a pupil that divides against your costs.
So tuition students don't divide
Just revenue.
into the tax rate?
Correct. They lower,
They still.
They're offsetting
do
revenue.
offsetting
Revenue comes in.
Their revenue.
But they don't count toward our school if they're not paying tuition?
so the easiest way is, let's just say there's 100 kids, and you get 10 tuition students, all right? The 100 kids stay at 100 kids. The 10 tuition students just represent money
Right.
that
Revenue.
represents a revenue that goes against whatever you've budgeted for those 100 students.
It's almost an either or, right? So in the case of Wardsboro, right, so they send a lot of students to Leland and Gray, and they pay tuition, but we don't get, Leland and Gray or West River does not get their equalized pupils. Wardsboro keeps their equalized pupil. But they pay tuition.
I mean, it's a really good question.
Yeah, it's good to understand that.
Okay, thank you.
So I think the concern that I hear from the board is that if Windham is allowed out, there's a potential that you'd lose like the 6th graders that we have this year, which is not going to happen because 95% of the kids from Windham come to Leland Gray anyway, but I realize it's at a different rate. But suppose in Wardsboro or Marlborough or any of the other, or Townsend for that matter, anywhere where you have high school choice, somebody could opt out, correct?
So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, public high school choice is something different, and you can explain.
Okay, so if that doesn't affect your,
Money doesn't follow
the money doesn't follow, okay.
for public high school choice.
Right.
So somebody from Dover who's not in the West River Modified District, not coming here, is not as negative as somebody from Windham if we weren't in the union not coming here? I'm not clear on what the difference would be.
Well, so we're basing this off of fiscal year 20's budget, right? So
Right.
we know approximately, pretty close, how many tuition students are coming from Dover, Wardsboro, Marlboro.
Right, but
So
you
we
don't
budget
know,
based on that,
but you don't know beyond that
right?
what those might be in those towns either, correct?
What those might be in those towns.
What your tuition students might be from non-West River MUED districts, like Wardsboro or Marlboro.
Well, we have a pretty good idea, and we budget based on those numbers that we're
Well, can you do
gathering.
the same with women?
Absolutely. In the end,
And is it any different in terms of positive or negative? I mean, we wouldn't be any different. If we were let out of the union, we wouldn't really be any different
Equalize
than.
people we lose.
Pardon me?
well, we're
It does
talking
make
about
it-
the
go ahead,
difference. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
No, go ahead, Jeff.
It
No.
does make a difference because those are our equalized pupils now. And every equalized pupil that our district loses affects the entire district's sustainability. We watch declining enrollment and our equalized pupils keep going down and down and down and our expenses stay the same. Or even if we cut our expenses because we're dividing by a smaller number, the tax rate continues to go up. So to permanently lose all those equalized pupils has an effect on every school, every student in the West River Education District. So yeah, we lose that. We lose that, and that affects our long-term sustainability. Those are less kids that are coming to our school.
I understand
And
what you're saying.
whether or not they tuition into us and the money that it costs, whatever, it's about the kids that, we're serving now, and that's a hit now and going forward,
I
a
get
permanent
that.
hit.
I really do, I get that. I wonder though from a, I don't even know what to call it, Joe. We're putting the economic burden on the backs of kids. And that seemed, and I know, I see your eyeballs rolling back in your head, I get
I
it.
never roll my eyes, and it's not always about money. It is about what we can offer for programs. So
Well, yeah,
that's
but the
that's
kids
the
are the
crux of this.
hostages. From what I'm hearing, the kids are the hostages or the whatever you want to call it. They're the ones being counted to make that possible. So it's almost like you're going to punish the kids. It doesn't make any sense to me.
You could have the opposite argument. The less students we have in this building, the less equalized pupils that come in, the less at ADM we have, the more we have to either raise taxes or reduce programs. Those are the realities. And the reason why we know those are the realities is because we've been dealing with it.
Well, I think.
We've been dealing with it for quite a number of years
No,
now
I
with
think
declining
it's always the
enrollment.
reality, though. It doesn't matter what tag is placed on the student. The reality is, if the less students you have, the less revenue you have, period. It doesn't matter whether it's ADM or tuition or what have you.
But there's a
It's-
difference.
I know there's a difference, but at the end of the day, it's always a matter of the more students you have, the better off you are financially.
Right, but the more students we have, the better we are with our programming as well. One of the things, we actually are a very high-spending school district. And the reason one of the reasons why, and I will say, West River is a fairly high-spending school district, but Leland and Gray, before we transitioned into now, July 1st, our West River district, we've been a high-spending high school. And the reason we've been a high-spending high school is the Leland and Gray board had made many decisions over the years to continue with programming even while our enrollment was declining. So that meant our costs were going to go up. There were times when we realized we could not sustain every bit of programming. For one thing, it was harder and harder to hold certain types of classes because we didn't have enough bodies in a classroom to hold a class. For example, the first thing we cut, and Will Maury will remember it, we cut Latin. We used to offer Latin here, and it was a wonderful course for many students, but the numbers dwindled enough, so we had to cut the Latin. Then French was cut, and we tried to keep French for years. So that's the trickle of the loss of ADM. And it has been a slow process for us. We see in the future, looking at our numbers as they stand today, we see that leveling out. So we're trying very hard to maintain all of our programs so that we are a high-quality school that students want to come to. And so that's critically important to me as a board member and a taxpayer, and I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I've heard people's support for doing what we can to keep our programming here. So it really has an awful lot to do with programming.
And that's an awful big burden for 7 children to bear, in my opinion.
I would say that there's 200 and, how many students do we have in this school, 712?
295.
That bear the burden.
But they're not the ones who are, they've already made their families on them, have already made a choice to be part of the unified board. We have not, and we have a solid reason for wanting our kids to be able to make a different choice. And I think it's a reason any parent would understand. I mean, we have a section of kids in our community who traditionally go to Green Mountain. It's probably 5% to 2% of our student population. But in order to do that, they have to do X number of years in Windham, 2 years down here, and then they can change. And that just seems
And yet they're public
contrary.
school students. They are public school choice students when they're 9 through 12.
Yes.
And we count them as ADM.
Yes, but it's the 7th and 8th picture.
Yeah, well, that's been ongoing since the law passed, right?
That's been, yes, right, but it wasn't
Not
the
public
initial,
school.
it was not the initial.
We never had, well, I understand with the agreement with
Right.
Windham when they first started it with the charter. Since public school opened up, it was 9-12, not 7-12.
You're a marathon guy.
Question?
Yeah, I just wanted to, can I just say something? It's not actually not a question. I was the one who circulated this petition to have this vote in Windham. The reasoning behind it wasn't financial. It wasn't so Windham could save a couple of pennies on its taxes or its money. The reason was the Windham kids. And that's what I think this question ought to be about, not about whose tax rate goes up or down a few pennies. Town of Windham was made a promise when we joined Leland and Gray as a 7 to 12 middle and high school. Okay, that 7 to 12 middle and high school doesn't exist. It's now a 6 to 12 middle and high school that's part of a larger district. The thing we joined has been dissolved. We need to look at, we made this choice to vote to leave Leland and Gray for our kids, for the vitality of our town. In the big picture, if Windham becomes a more attractive town and attracts more families and more kids, there will be more kids at this school. There will be more kids in Vermont. If Windham is a less attractive town because the kids are tied to coming down here, it makes Vermont less attractive to families and it brings less people into Vermont. You know, this is about the vitality of our town and our kids. When we signed up, we have it in the minutes of when we joined Leland and Gray that our kids from grades 7 through 12 could be tuitioned if they chose to Green Mountain High School. We had it in writing. And I had to sit on this board when parents came to me with their came here with their 7th grade kids saying, hey, we live in North Windham, we're sending our kids to Green Mountain High School. We want to send them, can you tuition them to for 7th and 8th like we were promised? And this board, well, the Leland and Gray board, not this board, said, no, we can't do that. That promise was made by a bunch of other people, and we can't abide by it. The town of Windham is way north of here. You know, and the north of Windham is way north of center of Windham. So I'm hoping that our neighbors in our neighboring towns will look beyond the couple of pennies on the tax rate and the equalized pupil formula, which could be totally changed by the legislature next year, and all the other financial give and take that goes along with school budgets, and just look out for the welfare of the town of Windham and our kids, who ought to have a choice as to whether they go north or south to their high school.
I just want to point out that the Windham stays a member of this district, and is a member of this district 712. The district, what Windham joined didn't go away. It just became part of something larger. So, I mean, you're still, if this vote doesn't go through, Windham is still 712 here.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's in the Articles of Agreement.
But this-
That's how that continues to work.
But the LNG union did dissolve, he's right when he says that, right? It's dissolved as of July 1st.
You're talking about grades.
Well,
It's not, yeah.
Did
Yeah,
Leland
sure.
and Gray dissolve, the school district, on the
well,
1st?
did Newfane dissolve?
Yes, it did.
You're meeting Thursday.
No, but we're finishing up business till December. We can't
know-
make any new contracts after the 1st.
Correct. And Leland and Gray still exists until December to
It-
dissolve its stuff.
it
But
exists.
Operationally, it's governed by a new board, and those
Okay.
districts cease to exist.
And so
But
by
that-
the end of the school year, there will be no Leland and
As
Gray.
part of our Articles of Agreement, Windham is a 7/12 member of the new district.
Either way,
that
when they send you a payment, who
That's
they
part of
send
the
it to now?
process.
If Wyndham sends you a payment, who do they send it to? Do they send it to Leland and Gray, or do they send it to the West River District?
Well,
I'm not sure.
I don't
what
know.
your
I don't
point
deal with
is.
those with the accounting.
You
I
don't know, okay. Lori, could you answer that question?
What difference does it
If-
make
If
who
money
they
came
pay?
to
What's
this
the point of
building-
this question?
The point of this question is pretty simple, is he said that it was dissolved, and you're saying, no, it's not dissolved, and well, you're meeting to finish up business.
It comes to something else, but be that as it may, it's not, I mean,
Well,
it's a
if this
decision
vote-
that all
We'll
those,
drop
it's
that
all
part
those
of it. Let me
union
ask
towns
you a
get to make
question.
this.
You two are on the
They're
Leland and
7-12.
Gray board,
Yep.
right? You're on the Leland and Gray board.
Yes.
Okay, in the original Leland and Gray charter, was there any provision in there for what happens if the Leland and Gray School District dissolves? Goes according to Act 46, Leland and Gray School District dissolved.
Don't know.
It's operating under a different entity.
Again, to what end?
Well, do you know the answer?
No.
In the original contract, is there anything that says
No.
what happens if Leland and Gray dissolves?
No, I do not.
No, there's not.
It would
Okay.
be in statute probably,
Okay,
because that's.
so I can see if
University
there's a standing district in place, okay, and they want to withdraw, every member town should have a vote. If the school district that they signed a contract with, the charter, saying we're a member of the Leland and Gray School District, is no longer in existence, why do the other towns get to vote?
The law.
Well,
It's the union school law.
It's the law, but it's the law, because we say so, it's the law.
No.
Okay.
No,
I would like,
Well,
I just want to.
I would like to
Okay,
know,
wait,
I would
wait.
like to know if anybody has a copy of that original document, and if so, if there's a clause in there about if the district dissolves.
There is none.
There is none.
okay, Lindsay, you were next.
I just wanted to make a little clarification to that about the Leland and Gray district dissolving in exactly the same way that Townsend Elementary School is dissolving in
Correct.
Newfane Element. And in all of those schools, all of those students are obviously still going there and obviously still belong there. And there is no, it's not like it was just thrown out. These things have changed slightly. There's been renaming of a existing entity, I just don't think it's.
The very simple answer is, the other 4 towns voted to be in a K-12 district. Windham voted not to be part of the K-12 district.
They voted to be the 7-12
That's
part of
exactly
that.
right.
No, they did not vote for that. That is a lie. That is a downright lie. You show me one provision in there where it says, but will remain in the high school,
It's the law.
in Act 46. There is none.
This has no point for information meeting.
Well, it does for legality and for
It's
common
not
sense.
doing- You're not
We're
holding
not
it
doing
illegal.
legality, we're doing a public information. This doesn't answer a question that's been posed, it's just an
I don't think anybody in Windham would
argument.
say this is an illegal vote.
I'm not
Are
saying
there
it's
any actual
illegal.
questions out here
Obviously
from the
it's
public?
illegal.
Is this a question or is this just a statement?
It is actually a question.
Okay.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with making statements either.
I wasn't gonna say there was, I just asked for questions, and if somebody had a question, they were
So-
gonna get to ask.
So one of our major concerns, I'm Carolyn Partridge, I chair the Windham School Board. And one of, I think I can speak for the board when I say that one of our major concerns is the fact that technically by law, even though we agreed originally to allow our 7th and 8th graders, 7 through 12, to go to Green Mountain if they so chose. Actually, it doesn't specify Green Mountain, it says any other high school in this original agreement. That somewhere along the line, things changed so that now the students that we have, and they're generally on the northern end of town, and if you're familiar with Windham, you understand how spread out we are and how much more sense it makes for some of those kids to go to Green Mountain and Chester. Now, somewhere along the line, things changed so that if you choose to go to Green Mountain, either under public high school choice or under the 1969 agreement, you have to go to Leland and Gray for 7th and 8th grade. And my question is to all of you, does that make sense to you educationally or socially? Does that make sense to send kids down to Leland and Gray for 2 years and then allow them to go to Green Mountain for 9 through 12?
To me, it makes no sense.
I would suggest that it's the same as any other student who chooses to do high school choice. In this case, I mean, students only can take advantage of public school choice 9 through 12. So it doesn't matter what town they come from, whether it's Windham or another town. If they make that decision, they don't get tuition for public school. They don't get to choose for public school choice.
That
in the
wasn't part of
separate
the original agreement.
Well,
And I don't think that anyone sitting at at your table could say that you think it makes sense for kids to go to one school for 7th and 8th when all of their social networking and their academic understanding, with teachers and what have you, are being formed, and then be shifted over to another school for 9 through 12. And I just would say that, and as I said in my article this week that was in the Reformer yesterday, at the info meeting in Jamaica, we talked about nothing but numbers. I brought up this issue of our 7th and 8th graders having to switch over midstream, and how I felt that was disadvantageous for them. So that's my question. Do you think it makes sense to send a kid who can, and historically has been able to go to 7th and 8th grade in Chester, to now force them? And Emily, maybe you'll remember what law made that happen, and will you sign on to legislation with me to get that changed when we go back to Montpelier?
I don't, what you would, I don't ever tell anybody I would sign onto legislation until I see it, as you know. But I mean, that's been in place, I can't remember the law, it might have been 131 years ago. I can't, it's been a long time. So your students have been addressing that issue for quite some time now.
Well,
And it may have been just the public school choice law, I don't know.
Before I made that judgment, I would want to know what year it happened. because
Yeah, I don't remember, Carolyn,
You know,
I don't.
and people, you know,
been a while.
somehow they work it out, I don't care to know how they do it, but it just doesn't make sense. You're not getting those kids anyway, you know?
And if you change the situation, you get to count the kids who choose to go to Green Mountain for 9 through 12.
Well, they already do.
Who does?
No.
They do.
They do, right, that's what I'm saying. You get to count them if
And
they
when the
choose.
leaves, we don't get to count.
I understand that. But perhaps if somebody had addressed this issue and resolved the question that involves, at the very most, 1 or 2 kids a year, if that, it's probably 1 or 2 kids a decade, maybe we wouldn't be having this vote. Did anybody ever think of that?
I don't know how many students we get in here on public school choice or we lose on public school choice, but they're all in the exact same situation.
Marlboro's not.
Yeah, they are. If they,
Well,
well,
ninth grade.
I mean,
Right.
they're
They're not public school choice.
they're not public school choice.
They're
Not.
They're tuition paying
They're
9 through
tuition
12.
paying student, like Warsboro would be as well.
Mike, you had a...
I just wanted to point out kind of what Caroline was saying, her argument about social emotional, growth and academic growth, and starting with your peers in that same 7th grade, is the exact same argument that this board's considering for the people who want to come here for 6th and 7th grade tuition free. So just want to point out that it's the same argument, just from different perspectives. So if we view it one way for one perspective, we should view it consistently. That's all.
But it's not our decision. This is a
No, it's a
decision
voter
that the
decision,
voters make.
right.
We don't have a decision. Our board doesn't even have a real
No,
role
you're
in this.
absolutely right.
It should be the Townsend School Board, the Newfane School Board, those.
But I know it's
holding
going to come
these
up at the
meetings.
next meeting for the 2 people wanting to come
Right.
here. So.
You had a question, sir?
Yes, I have 2 questions. The one is kind of very basic. What is the effective date of the change if this vote happens on the 16th and Windham is allowed out?
July 1, 2020. 2021. No, 2020. Oh, I'm sorry, 2020. I got it in my fiscal year.
July
we're in
1st,
fiscal
2020.
It's 2020. And then
Okay,
I'm
so
like,
a
no,
year-
that's
a
our
year
fiscal
from
year
now,
now, and I have to put it out a year. It's 2020.
Okay. The second question is that if 8 equalized students, 7 actual students are not part of the Leland and Gray population, is the presumption that that does not change the expenses at all? That having 8 fewer students doesn't lower expenses?
Correct.
And all the expenses stay the same? So variable cost is 0?
So much of the cost is physical plant, teachers. I mean, 8 students isn't enough to lose a teacher.
Is that a
It's-
classroom?
Depends on the student's individual needs.
And those students, those 8 students are spread across the entire 7-12 continuum. So, if it were 8 students in 12th grade, maybe. But it's across the entire 7-12 continuum.
It's not just elementary schools, you're looking at a concept. So if you lost 8 students in an elementary school classroom, that would be just one classroom. Because now you've got 8 little
One
bodies.
here, one there.
Oh, I understand, it's 8 spread across.
Yeah, it's 8 spread across.
And you can't get any cost savings out of that, not really.
Other questions? Anything? You guys, did everybody get a copy of this if they wanted it? All the numbers? I mean, it's there if you want it.
Vote is the 16th.
The vote is the 16th, absentee ballots now. It's in your local polling place.
The board is meeting on the
Can-
15th, the night before.
Yeah, the board will meet the night before, but
Lori, can you give us a household number like you had done previously with the tax increases of like on a $200,000 or whatever? Like, I understand it's like a
So $20 is 1 cent on a $200,000 house. $20 increase for every 1 penny increase in tax rate on a $200,000 house.
Okay. Thank you.
So, okay, so 1 cent increase.
That means a lot more to a lot of people than looking at this and saying, okay, it goes from 27 to 45, that seems like more, but is that like $2 or like $700 or like $6,000? Like, to have that is really important.
We'll go with ladies first, Kathy, and then,
Okay, I have a question. You say this will
Sure.
go into effect until 2020. The financial impact would not happen until 2020?
right.
And the reason I ask that is because all the towns have received their tax rates. And if it was going to be effective this year, then in fact, those tax rates would not be accurate. And they would have
Right.
to be refigured. So we do have a year's reprieve before we will actually have to factor this in. Okay.
Yep. Yes,
Well,
sir.
my question is, part of that is, I'm a Jamaica resident, my tax is gonna go up if we let Windham out. And we got other projects in our town that are under consideration of spending money and stuff. What I'm curious is this gonna get worse for us in Jamaica? What is this, 1 cent or something? Is the projection that this may get worse?
The projection for the first year with Windham out and no tuition students is a 33% a 33-cent tax increase to the unified rate. And with 100% of the students tuitioned back in first year with Windham out, the projection is a 27-cent tax increase. So, you know,
Lori.
yeah,
I just want to point out, that's with some assumptions of a 3% increase in expenses and also decreases in equalized pupils as a whole anyway, which is what we've been seeing, so.
Right.
I just want to
I mean-
point, there's other assumptions in that.
and these these are best guesses. You know, we haven't built the budget for that yet. Obviously, if Windham was not a part of the district for 712, and we knew that, we would build the budget, you know, as responsibly as we could. But that doesn't exist yet. That's just based on numbers we could do and assumptions we could make. We put out the best thing we could do. Emily, then Mike.
I was just gonna say, with tax, when we're seeing, in any time, regardless of the reason, when we're seeing tax rate increases, we often take a very hard look. And our past practice has been, at least in our individual districts, certainly at Leland and Gray, has been to say, if we're seeing a significant increase in our tax rate, what can we do to reduce that? And typically, that's what I was trying to talk about earlier. Typically, in the past, what we've had to do is reduce our staffing levels. And when we reduce our staffing levels, we reduce our programming, typically. And so that's where the impact can be.
And doesn't some of the cost of all of this go to supervisory union administrative costs?
That's a line item in the budget.
Right, it is a line item in the budget. And did we or did we not add another person? Didn't we?
Yes, on July 15th, the
At a
Director of
sig-
Operations is beginning.
And that was a fairly expensive line item, correct?
It affects the tax rate, nothing. It is being used on savings from previous year.
But it won't always be used on
No,
savings.
just in year one, you're correct.
In year one. So, I mean, as you're going out, that increase in supervisory personnel now, so you have supervisory personnel going up and student population going down. Does that not create a question in anybody's mind?
It's a one-year position.
It's a
We have
one-year
not
position.
decided whether we'll continue that position.
One sec, I wanted to, Mike had a question.
Lori, I have a question for you. When I see that you put the assumptions with the 2 cent reduced incentive, so does that mean these numbers already have that factored in? Okay, so then, I kind of looked at this and wanted to do an apples to apples comparison, because it, it kind of gets lost with looking at the, 25, 50, whatever percent. So, the assumption with Windham Inn, and that would be 100%, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. And then there's the last page, which was Windham Out with 100% tuition. So I just want to point out that in fiscal year '21, shows a 27-cent increase with Windham Inn. In fiscal year '21 with Windham Out and 100% tuition shows the same exact increase. So like when Joe just said it was a 27-cent increase, that 27-cent increase is coming at us anyway, according to these numbers. So then fiscal year '22 with Windham Inn has a 45-cent increase. Fiscal year '22 with Windham Out and 100% tuition is a 51-cent increase, so it's really a 6-cent increase. Right, so, and then the last year is harder to predict, and it does go up 21 cents by fiscal year '23, but I'm just trying to make it easier for people to understand apples to apples.
And so that's, the last year shows when there's more equalized pupils,
Mhm.
that's where there's a bigger gap.
Okay.
Rick, you had your hand up, right?
I was just going to comment that the conversation about supervisory union position was so far off topic, it wasn't worth discussing.
Thank you. Okay, anything else tonight?
I don't see it that way, but whatever.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, we don't need executive session, do we? All right. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Second? All in favor, please say aye.
Right.
Thank you for coming. Don't forget to vote.